Today, live in the lab, Keith Bilous, myself, Seth Yakatan, how to raise cash, how to communicate your message clearly to get some cash. We'll see you soon, live in the lab with Keith Bilous.
Hey, this is what's bringing us in today. A little bit of chill. Yeah, a little bit of chill today. Coming from the lab, you got your host. Oh, you got your host, Keith Bilous, joining you live in the lab from Winnipeg, Canada. I threw it out there that if you're looking to if you're looking to raise money, I think I'm stuck. No, there you go. You're looking to raise some money, looking to communicate your message, you're looking to perhaps just do a better job communicating your message all around. Today's show, Seth Yakatan joining us in the lab. He's just outside the dentist. Yeah, he tells me before the show that he had a dentist appointment, had to cancel many times, but he's hanging out, waiting for us in the green room patiently. We're going to welcome him here in a few moments. But before we do that, I want to remind you, nation, that we have a morning show, and it is Juniory. Yep, Juniory, Seth. It's that time of the year where we invite everybody in the world to pause and reflect on their January resolutions that they have not hit. And say, hey, it's Juniory. You can reflect, you can reclaim, you can gather and own your January resolutions in the month of January. So it's that month of the year where that time of the year, we're like, hey, we want to help you achieve those goals. Come join us in January. Brand new course we've launched here in the lab with myself and C. Marty Fit, the businessman, the creator, the athlete, and the AI, helping you move forward. So you might want to consider that as you rock and roll through life. January, you got a few weeks to reclaim the rest of the year, because before you know it, it's going to be December, and then it's going to be January. Going to be back to the same cycle. Yep, the same cycle of feedback, not failure. Feedback. Speaking of feedback, Seth Yakatan, California, University of California, Irvine, raising and selling. The guy's raised $1 billion. I wonder if you took $1 billion and stacked it up, how much that would be. I wonder if Seth knows the answer to that. 22 companies he's sold. 22. I've had guys in the lab who've sold 2, 3, 4. I've sold 1. 22. Wow. I'm going to invite him back when he's done 50. Seth, when you hit 50, you're back in the lab, man. 28 more to go. I want to have the first guy ever on the planet to sell 50 companies, at least that I've met. Welcome back into the lab to have a chat. But Seth's about, if you're struggling to communicate your vision to those capital gatekeepers, or if you're exploring selling your business, I have, but you don't know anything about due diligence. Oh, due diligence. Ooh, boy, not fun. A little tip about due diligence, actually, to business guys selling your business. So when I was selling my company, I found myself where myself and my business partner were both doing the same thing. And the company started doing this. And I was like, wait a minute. No. We need to focus on keep running the business. And one guy's got to focus on the due diligence, because when you're in you're in the process of selling your company, that due diligence will take your time and suck you to death. Because if somebody's giving you a lot of cash, like lots and lots of cash, they're going to want to make sure those I's are dotted and those T's are crossed. So Seth can help you with term sheets, due diligence, earnouts. Oh, I've done that too. I've absolutely been there for an earnout. Seth, we killed it. We over-exceeded on our earnout. So we're gonna catch up with Seth Yakatan in a second. 30 years experience as a corporate finance professional. His specialties are raising cash and selling companies. That's the kind of guy I like to have in my lab. Seth Yakatan, the guy who likes to raise money and sell companies. 22 of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've helped people sell 22 companies. The headline's awesome. So,
I love it. Hey, man, welcome to the lab. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. I know you fit me in between the dentist and the coffee shop and all those things in between. So I'm from me to you, man, I'm really grateful. We met in the brand built community. I've been following your feed on LinkedIn. You bring laughter to my feed. I love the stuff you post. And when I saw your name on the calendar today, I'm like, I'm looking forward to this chat today with Seth Yakatan.
I just hope I can match your energy level, Keith.
You know what? It's the water we drink here in Manitoba.
That's what it's got to be. You ever been to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan?
Or maybe it's the Canadian cannabis, Seth. It could be one of the two. Or maybe it's a little bit of the both. Who knows? Hey, you can always use a little bit of edibles in your coffee in the morning, no?
Sure. Yeah, depends. I mean, everyone's got a different thing. So.
I totally kid nation. Settle down. Settle down. We're just having some fun. We're having fun with the product that's fully legal here in Canada, but just taxed up the yin yang. That's the whole business I don't want to get into. I have been to Saskatoon.
Gotcha. Well, I've been there plenty. So
what do you got going on in Saskatoon?
I was involved with a biotech company there for a long time. Believe it or not, there were a lot of large investors in Saskatoon.
Yes.
Couple big family offices and several large pension funds. Managers were domiciled out of there for a minute. So
yeah. So Seth, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get your start in raising your first dollar, helping sell your first company? Now you're $1 billion in, you're 22 companies in, 30 years in. Like, take me back to year one, friend.
Okay. Well, again, my marketing team does a great job with self-aggrandizement and staggering numbers. So I appreciate that. My story is pretty simple. It goes back to my dad. He grew up in an orphanage and ended up becoming, a globally known player in the biotech industry and a very successful serial entrepreneur. So, I literally had my first job when I was 9. And I've never had kind of more than or less than 2 jobs kind of since then. So I think either you're, not there's anything good about it, but I mean, some people are just built to work. And some people are just built to be entrepreneurs. And, I was either very lucky or very cursed, because when I was about 16 or 17 years old, I knew this is what I wanted to do, right? I kind of knew that being involved in the game of M&A and raising money and figuring out how to exit companies was just what I was going to do professionally. So it started from inception.
That's cool.
The first money that I think I honestly ever. So, we'll give away a couple of secrets. So I don't know what your production team wants to do, but this is a big reveal. Big reveal now, right? Like,
hold on. I got to get something ready for this big reveal, my friend. Okay, so I got some sound effects ready for the big reveal.
I'm ready. Okay, so I'm trying to orient myself as kind of big reveal number 1. Most things happen for me in life with just serendipity. So I was in grad school, and I don't think I've actually ever told this story. So I was in grad school, and my dad would just show up with like one lunatic inventor after another. Like, you name it. Like, we had a guy with a nail clipper. We had a guy with, who I don't even remember. Like, we had one guy who, wanted to take sheep waste and turn it into something. Like, it just whatever.
One lunatic investor after another. That's kind of the quote of 2024 said.
One lunatic inventor after another. A lot of dentists, actually a lot of dentists. Most dentists.
Hey, I know a few dentists that are inventors. So what's it with working in somebody's teeth where you become an inventor?
It's not that. It's that they all have a doctor ego, but they all have a surgeon ego, but they don't have a surgeon's balance sheet. So they all feel like, oh, I'm going to come up with some device and I'm going to get rich because I hate fucking doing my job, because my mom wanted me to be a dentist and I hate being a dentist. Right? So it's kind of like, anyway, so let's go back to the story. So the story is, I'm in grad school and my dad shows up with this friggin' lunatic who, and it doesn't sound so lunatic-y now, but what he had is he had an you've seen it. It's like a globe. It's like a round globe that is a hand sanitizing dispenser. Company's
Yes.
called Soaptronics. You've seen it. So anyway, this guy showed up in probably 94 and had a bunch of patents around this, friggin' automated hand sanitizing machine. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But he wanted a business plan written. And I had been in a venture fund for a couple of years. And um, I want to say that, this is back in like 94, that I charged him, I don't know, $5,000 to write a business plan, which for me, I think like paid for my entire, year of grad school.
Yeah.
And I wrote him a business plan and he loved it. And we did a meeting with a guy in Newport Beach. And the guy looked at me and he goes, it's a great idea. I'm going to put $2.5 million in the company. I didn't even know we were at an investor meeting, right? We literally, like 2 days later, the guy writes a check. And I raised the company $2.5 million on a fucking business plan that I didn't even want to write. And I have no idea what ever happened with the company after that. COVID shows up. I see these things everywhere. I'm like, oh, it's another one I missed. But so that's like, a lot of the, I say to people, and it's misogynistic, so I have to apologize in advance for it in today's day and age. But like, raising capital is like dating, like you might go on 800 dates and you don't find the right person. And then you're resigned that I'm finished and I'm done and I'm not looking and I'm going to be a monk for the rest of my life. And you go to the grocery store and you slip on a banana and someone picks you up and that's the person you're supposed to be with, right? Like sometimes the investment world just kind of happens like that. So anyway, that's kind of like my first, where did I raise my first, money story. And it was for something that I was, like normally involved in as an advisor or as a consultant or as a, founder, and just happened to show up on the right day at the right meeting at the right time. And, that's happened like 20 times for me. So
It's this idea of serendipity
with
Keith and Seth.
Yeah, there's another kind of key lesson in there, which comes, I think, with age, and it's this notion that I've ascribed to, which is the difference between forcing and allowing, right?
Oh.
So a lot of people, especially younger entrepreneurs, they want to force this. I have the greatest widget, and I'm going to meet 300 guys, and I'm going to meet 100 of the biggest corporations in the world, and I'm going to convince them through repeated blunt force trauma that my thing is better, and I'm going to out hustle the next person, and that's going to work, and I'm going to jam this thing in here. Gosh, that was me until I was about 40. I'm 53 now.
I can relate to that. If I can join you in that, I can completely relate to that, Seth. I just hit 52 this year. I was the same person you just described, right?
Yeah, I actually have to publicly, and guys have been doing it privately, big reveal. I have to publicly thank my ex-wife, because when I was 40, I went through a divorce, and then I lost both of my parents, and that entire that life process really allowed me to let go of a lot of things that I had held on to for a long time. And it awakened in me this notion of just kind of allowing. So still do the 300 meetings, but instead of me following up and convincing and jamming and trying and blah, 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 hey, here's my thing. Either you like it or you don't. If you don't like it, no harm, no blood, no foul. I'd love to show you something in the future. If you like it, here's the follow-up. Just going to leave it there, right? So that notion, the other kind of second big secret or big reveal is that, don't force it. Just let it happen. And the harder I lean into that and the more I let go of even my preconceived fears, amazing things have just blossomed for me. So it's not anything they're going to teach in business school, but it's become a valuable part of my process, thought modality, inner working lexicon.
At the beginning of the show, I told you that I was eager to chat with you, and I had the date circled on my calendar, and I wanted to sit down and chat with you. And I'm going to tell you why, because of what you just told me for the last 4 minutes. There's something in your feed. There's something in the aura you put out. There's something in the way that you communicate with your words and the vibe you put out, marketing people aside. But there's something that you put out there that I'm like, I vibe with this guy. I can relate to what he's talking about. I can see you're of this place of, here's what I am. Here's what I'm putting out there. If you like it, great. You buy it. If you don't, I'm here if you do like it one day. And it's clear that that's what you're putting out there, frankly. And I know I'm frozen right now, and I will get unfrozen here in a second. But I can see that vibe with you, and I think, Seth, it does come with age, doesn't it? Because I too went through a divorce in my mid 40s, so I can relate with you there, and I've taken the time to grow up. I've taken the time to slow down. I've taken the time to not force like you just did this here. And I'm like, all right, here's what I am. Here's what I'm all about. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be a man of integrity. And you have to like me, you don't.
Yeah, look, I think age is an essential component to that realization.
Yeah.
Okay. But there also has to be an innate willingness in the human being to improve. So again, I don't want to be too misogynistic, but because we're of the same vintage, you probably have 2 or 3 of your buddies who are on the second wife with a baby situation, right? 56-year-old guy, they're on the second wife, they have the new family, and they have 2 kids in diapers, right? I'm not saying that that's not a dream scenario, but I'm also saying that I'm not sure that every single one of the guys that I know that's in that scenario did the work to improve. Some of them are still the same asshole they were when they were married to their first wife, right? Some of them might have just had serendipity occur. But I think to your earlier point, age is usually a requisite component of this awareness, but you also have to want as a person, and not everyone's wired this way, to improve and to learn and to try and do it better and to try and be better. And I think that's also a requisite component to it for me, right? Like, so anyway,
so I got a question for you, Seth. So having a very successful father, successful family, growing up with that, one can say it's a blessing and a curse. You embraced it. 9 years old, you're like, yeah, I like this. I dig this. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because some might struggle with the whole ideation of stepping in successful dad's shoes.
I did struggle with it.
Yeah.
So from the time I was about 16, 17 till the time I was 35, I didn't want to talk to my dad. I didn't want to be in the same room as my dad, right? He was such a, I remember one day in my fraternity in college, he shows up on a Thursday afternoon unannounced with an entourage, like 7 people in suits, right? Literally. And just starts being like, okay, whatever, like ordering people around. And, I'm up in like a bedroom smoking a joint at that point, and someone's like, your dad's here. And I'm like, oh my God. So, like within 20 minutes, we go from a situation where I'm in control of my environment and I know what's going on. And literally, like, my dad's ordering, the kitchen staff around, like, all right, make this happen. And we're having roast beef and, blah, blah, blah. And there's 19 people coming in from Denver to see him. So, yeah, it was tough. The other thing about my dad was that some of his human factor skills as a parent were rough because he didn't have a parent, right? So, like, my dad wanted to do everything for me. So, hey, you want to get your first job? I'll call this guy. Hey, you want to do this? This guy will make it. Call this person. You're in London. Great. I've got a place. So my dad was such a great person because he wanted to do everything. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. I wanted to do it myself. I saw this person who had come from nothing, who had achieved all these things, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do better than that on my own. So between the time I was like, for about 10 or 15 years, there was a real rigid push-pull there. I decided in 2001 to leave the large financial institution I was working for and start a consulting practice with my dad. And that was about a 2-year really difficult transition. But after that, it was probably the most fulfilling time of my life, relationship of my life, to be able to work with my dad as my partner for 14 years. It was awesome. So
you bring emotion to me when I hear you say that.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, look, again, we talk about these realizations, right? The realization there early on was that my dad really wasn't going to change. My dad was exactly who he was until the moment before he died. I got lucky. I've sold a lot of companies for other people, right? That's why my numbers are so amazing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And most investment bankers that are worth their salt in that game have numbers that are way better than mine. But my dad had all of these pocket listings, in effect, of small, usually family-owned businesses that were really well run and did one thing amazingly well. And when I walked into practice with him at inception, there were 2 of these, and he was like, "Great." So it was in the first kind of 20 months that I was with my dad, I sold 2 companies for clients. One that was about a $5 million trade, and the other was about a $16 million trade. And he immediately, like, the persona interaction changed from me being, a son and a parasite to me being a partner and like, okay, you can do your thing. So the dynamic changed. But man, like that, living in that shadow, look, my dad did really well. It wasn't like we were super rich,
But it sounded like your dad's personality was rich, and that's what perhaps that's what.
Keith, we could do a whole show on my dad if you want. I mean, I could give you Stan stories till the age of 10.
No, we're not here. I simply asked the question about the shoes that you had to step into in life. We can do episode 2 on Stan one day. I'm happy to know.
Look, my dad managed a global sales force for the first research product in biotech that between 1974 and 1983 had 75% market share. Okay. We would go to a city and 3 people would pick us up. Any city that I ever went to on the planet, his GM and 2 of his salespeople would literally be in a car waiting for us at an airport. Anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere. So yeah, it was like, okay.
So let's keep going. Dad passes. You're in the business. You've gone through divorce. You're into your 50s now. You're into this next chapter. You're into a more let it come to me chapter. You've been kind of grinding. You've identified yourself. Seth Yakatan's your thing now. You know who you are. You're confident. You're proud of who you are. You're out there moving and shaking. What's day to day like for Seth? A lot of yesterday, just on a different vibe. Still buying, selling businesses, raising money.
Yeah. I mean, I got a couple. I'm trying to. I think like everyone else, I'm trying to figure out what's next. What I do is still very, very, very hard in the verticals that I do it in. So picking the right things and the right people to work on. This is going to sound really either self-serving or egotistical, but I don't even think I've achieved much at this point personally. So what I would like to achieve professionally is 1,000 times bigger than what I've achieved already. So that either drive or humility, I think, is what kind of keeps me going.
I love it.
So I field a lot of phone calls. I guess what's next or what's the day to day is, I have 6 or 8 projects that I'm involved with at any point in time. 1 or 2 of those are usually what I call enterprise, so they're very large, and I devote a lot of my personal energy and effort to those. I have a lot of people who want to talk to me and want help or want to show me projects. So there's a certain amount of screening that I go through. There's a certain amount of LinkedIn that I go through. There's a certain amount of personal that I go through. But honestly, I'm really at an interesting waypoint personally right now where I'm trying to figure out how I manifest that next enormous thing. And if you believe my bullshit on LinkedIn, I'm kind of convinced that that's going to happen in cannabis, given where the entire vertical is going. So, that's kind of what the day to day is for me. A lot of running around, a lot of running around.
Yeah. My camera keeps freezing on me. I would agree with you that cannabis is the next big vertical. We're seeing some pretty incredible things happen in industry. I can't get over, to be frank with you, and just kind of maybe rant for a second here. So I've played in the space for the last number of years on the investment side of things. I haven't done as well as I would have hoped because I've gotten caught up, like many, with how political the topic is in the United States, still to this day. It's just, and it's unfortunate yet bizarre, and I guess to me very naive at the end of the day with how political the project is, or how political the whole subject is in the States.
Yeah, I mean, is that a question, or is that you want me to comment?
Just maybe a statement, I guess. You can comment if you like, but it's just my POV that's it has not happened nearly as fast as myself and many would have thought it would happen on a federal acceptance level.
Me neither. The United States politically, and I'm not going to take a position, is a very interesting and weird place right now.
Oh yeah, I'm with you there. We're drinking the same Kool-Aid there. That's what I mean. Like I was, I guess, naive.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of weird people, and I talked to some astrology person the other day, and she told me that astrologically, we're in the same place as we were at the time of the American Revolution. So there's a lot of people and that's not going to happen again for like 200 or 300 years. So there's a lot of people that are worried that something crazy is going to happen. I'm a little worried about it. Not going to tell you I stay up at night worried about it, but yeah, I think federal reform is going to be the catalyst for massive amounts of capital infusion.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm optimistic that happens between now and 2030.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would bet on that. I frankly thought it was going to be by 2024, but
so did I.
That's clearly not happening, right? And it's not going to happen this election cycle.
No, it feels like we're going to get this Schedule 3 thing, which I don't think is great, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Yes. Again, drinking the same Kool-Aid.
Yeah. So I think, there are many businesses that are still figuring out how to do well, even with the constraints. And, I elucidate a lot of those businesses and business models in what I talk about in other interviews that I've done and also on LinkedIn. So,
yeah,
I'm personally, I'm waiting and building for that enormous, crescendo moment, which, given my alleged wisdom, I know is coming. I know it's coming. It's just a matter of when it comes, and I guess I'll just be a happy prognosticator when it occurs.
Yeah, I'll be right there next to it. And when it does come, you come back in the show. We'll talk about it. We'll refer to this episode about how we progress.
Timestamp it.
Exactly. It's exactly it. It's exactly it. So Seth, let's move away from cannabis into business. Now, a lot of people knock on your door. A lot of people call you. A lot of people contact you. A lot of people like, Seth, help me. And you pick one. You pick two. Maybe you pick three. What are the attributes that you look for in the human being that you're like, yeah, I want to work with that guy. I want to work with that girl. I want to work with that human being. What are those attributes, Seth?
I don't know that there's just, one. When I went to business school, they made us take a Myers-Briggs personality test.
Yeah.
So if you ascribe to that, there's 16 different personality types, and
Yes.
it was very interesting because in business school they would put you into groups of people that were effectively based upon Myers-Briggs diametrically opposed to one another, and we're like, you need to figure out how to work together. And so yeah, I'm not sure there's just one or two attributes about a person, which is how I'll try and drive the question, the answer to the question that I look for. I guess in general, there's probably two or three things that I want to see in a person.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see that they've had success doing something else. It doesn't have to be doing this business, but success in doing something else historically, I think is a good factor overweight for me. If you've built a business like this before and sold it, that's probably the best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. A second thing is that I don't want anyone as the CEO or really anyone in kind of a major C-level role that's fractional or that's doing more than one thing. Especially in some of the businesses that I'm involved with, maybe not biotech, maybe it could be a fractional CRO or a fractional CFO, okay, for a small company. But man, if you're in there and you're early stage and you're grinding and this is a project for you, that ain't for me. It ain't for me in any way. Like, you got to be committed. You got to be all in. This has got to be your spouse or your partner, because that's the kind of energy that it's usually going to take to make one of these things success. So I think a second thing is that you got to be all in, and there's no other thing you're doing. That's a big deal for me. I think a third thing is that I pretty firmly have kind of either a no asshole or a no know-it-all policy. So again, I'm extremely self-deprecating. I don't think anything I do is special. I don't think I have any superpowers. I will tell you very clearly that when someone comes to me with a project, my line of sight is infrared vision, right? Like, I can see exactly what the issues are and what I would do and where it goes. It's just going to come to me like a download.
Yeah.
And if someone isn't willing to listen to me and listen to my experience, they don't have to take all of my advice. But if they're such a know-it-all or they're such an egomaniac or there's such an a-hole that whatever I'm not gonna get mind share, I guess. If I don't have some portion of mind share, it's probably a no for me. So I think it's probably those three main things, and that's not something that you're, the first two are things you're probably going to get in a 30-second, kind of thing, or a 30-minute conversation. The other stuff, you kind of have to walk around in the other person's moccasins for a minute and feel them. And that, I think, takes a little more time. But out of the box, it's probably those three things, to be honest.
And I'm suspecting you've met enough people, Seth, that's over time, those attributes, when you meet somebody right away, you just know, don't you? Like, you probably know relatively quickly, like you said, until that third one where you maybe have to walk around in their shoes for a little bit. You probably know pretty quickly when you meet someone whether you're going to vibe or not. Am I correct?
Do we want to do another big reveal?
Oh. Dude, we're creating a brand new show, the Keith and Seth Show. We're just going to make reveals and we're going to just find it.
In life, the sales decision, whether it's an investor investing in your company, whether it's you trying to get someone to get involved into an amorous relationship with you, whether someone's going to buy tickets from a telemarketer, that's usually made in 45 seconds to a minute based upon the initial response. And it's the same thing. for me.
Mm.
Yeah, there are 6 or 7 things that people are going to do initially where I'm just going to turn off. And yeah, I can usually tell within, kind of 3 minutes of meeting someone, is this person for me? Like, am I going to invest more energy here or not? Whether I'm going to say it out loud.
Well, good.
But
So 36 minutes in.
yeah.
I've never used a sound effect more on the show in my entire life, so I'm in a good shape today.
Good. So yeah, but yes, to the answer to your question is yeah, undoubtedly.
It really is true, especially when you're raising money and you're doing the kind of things that you do in business. Like you're not dicking around. Like, yeah, there's nice guy, but there's also no, we're doing business. Right? Right? So
Yep. Yeah.
it's incredible to me. Hey, we got Chris Keats joining us from Los Angeles as well. Chris is a friend of the show. He's one of my morning show hosts. Thanks for sharing your story, Seth. You guys are probably up down the road from each other. He's a UCLA grad. I'll introduce you guys if you want. He's awesome.
Perfect. Love to. Yeah. Nice to meet you. Thanks for showing up.
Awesome dude. He's an awesome dude. A couple things stood out at me also on your well-written marketing profile, Seth Yakatan on LinkedIn, which was due diligence and earnouts. And I talked about them in my monologue because when I sold my previous company for a few bucks, Seth, I remember how due diligence stood out for me. And then I remember the earnout phase. Can we talk about those just for our entrepreneurs that are listening that are, maybe curious about the ins and outs of that? I talked about my due diligence experience where I said to my business partner at the time, going, you got to take care of that so I can keep driving revenue into the house. Because both of us were so caught up in due diligence that the company started kind of going, hello, company, you're trying to sell us. You got to keep running the company, Keith. I'm like, oh, right. Let's talk about diligence before we get to earnout, Seth, from your POV, with maybe some gold nuggets or some advice for people listening, and just this idea of due diligence and how hard it actually is.
Well, I'm going to go macro on you for a sec and go above that question for a moment. I have a friend, a mentor, an investor. His name is Craig Fox, who writes articles on M&A and cannabis. He wrote a great article that I'm happy to share, drop it in the feed, about the fact that, like, don't hate the player, hate the game, understand the game that you're playing. And investors' job is to get a return. So most private equity people and venture capital people have been lumped into this, a-hole finance bro box because, it's kind of like a G7 country, fighting against a non-G7 country. Just the weapons and the armamentarium and the force that you have to be able to keep pounding with lawyers and tricks is just greater. And if your job is to maximize the return for your investor so you can go do this again, then your incentive, honestly, is, I'm not going to say to totally screw the other side, but to probably screw the other side as much as you possibly can, right? So when you talk about buying or selling a company, and you talk about venture capital or private equity, what I think the first thing that people need to know on the road to due diligence and earnouts is that, remember, investors aren't your friends, and your incentives usually are completely misaligned from the investor, specifically as it relates to the mechanism and the toolbox in which they're going to come to buy your company. And what I'm going to say to that as an analogy, because I like dumb analogies, is that if I'm a battlefield doctor and I can save the guy's life that's on the table quickly by cutting off their leg, I'm not going to wake him up and say, do you not want a leg? I'm going to cut off the leg so they don't die, right? 30 years later, you could sit and, well, he might have been able to do something else to save the guy's life and the guy doesn't have a leg, right? Like, it's that same kind of analogy when we talk about how an investor is going to view a company. They don't care that you don't have a leg. They care that they've saved your life. And so anyway, so let's go to due diligence.
Mm.
Have you ever been fishing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you know what a treble hook is, correct?
Yes.
All right. So, what I like to tell people when you're selling a company is that an investor is usually armed with a lure that probably has somewhere between 4 and 12 treble hooks on it. And you have to understand that that's how they're oriented. And no matter what, you're going to get hooked by 25% of those barbs. And if you can't accept that you're going to get hooked by 25% of the barbs of the treble hook, don't sell your fucking company. Like, just don't do it. Okay? Due diligence is one of the barbs. It might be its own hook. So I'm private equity guy or investor. I come to Keith and I give you a term sheet and I say, I'm going to buy your company for X subject to my due diligence. What people don't understand is that it's much easier to sell a car, house, or boat than it is to sell a company. Why? Because when you sell a car, house, or boat, and big reveal, you hand them the keys and you leave and you drive off and you never see them again. When you sell a company, you're married to those people for the rest of your life, whether you want to be or not, because what they're going to try and do, because your incentives aren't aligned, is they're going to try and claw back as much cash from you as they possibly can for the term of your transaction. Okay? That's how the game works. Don't hate the game. Don't hate the player. Understand the game. That's why you need somebody like me. Not only do I understand the game, I show up and I'm, I'm death walking. I show up at a company and you know who I am, you're losing your job. I show up to a factory and there's 800 people and you look up me on the internet and I don't care what you're saying, you know what I'm here to do, right? So let me keep going down due diligence. So due diligence is just a tool via which, in most cases, and not all of these people are horrible, but in most cases, they're going to figure out a way to claw back more money. Mm-hmm. And depending upon the kind of business that you have and the level of due diligence that you're going to get in, the term due diligence is probably a 20, a 5 barbed treble hook, right?
It really is. I can relate to everything you're saying, Seth. When I sold my company, I remember a business associate at the time saying to me, Keith, this is going to be a 1,000-piece puzzle. And every piece is going to have to fit. You can get to 999 and you're going to have your ass screened along a bunch of them along the way. You get to 999. If you can't get that last piece, you're not going to get all the money. And he was so right.
Two things. I don't know that it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, but like when I sit down with somebody to do this, I kind of say, all right, let's say we get 60% of what you really want in cash.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that enough for you? Is that enough for you after tax? Is that enough for you to walk away? Is that enough for you to look at this as a marriage that just isn't going to work out? Right? Is that enough? Because if it's not enough, let's not go.
Yes.
Right? And when you go to due diligence, and I bet I'm going to come up with 4 or 5 things that I don't know a thing about your transaction, but if I'm a private equity guy, and again, to my other point, when the private equity guy sees me show up, they're like, oh shit, okay, this guy is going to be the guy against me. Like we've already won 4 points, right? So what are the diligence issues? Oh, well, I don't like your customer concentration. I don't like your customers. I actually don't like the fact that your customers aren't into long-term contracts. Actually, you know what? You have too many big customers, and I don't like the concentration because you have too many big customers. I don't like the fact that none of your customers are a recurring revenue customer. I don't like the fact that you market to people who could also steal your customers. So I haven't even looked at your company, and I can come up with 7 diligence objections for a deal that's going up and to the right. Actually, you know what? I don't think your growth rate is sustainable. You've grown too fast. I don't think you can continue to grow at that rate. I can't pay you on that continued growth rate. I have to pay you on a modulated growth rate because there's no way you can do that again. But if you do that again, I'll pay you, but I really won't because I'm going to screw you out of the earnout, which we'll get to next. Right? So I don't like the fact that you don't have a CFO. Actually, I don't like the fact that you don't have financial controls. You know what? You have too many financial controls. I don't think that we can integrate you into what we're going to buy and put you onto because your systems don't work. Oh, I've done an analytics of your systems. Your systems stink. Your system isn't going to integrate to our system. You bought the wrong system. We want you to buy a new system. Can I keep going down that rabbit hole? Let's talk about your facility. Is at least, I don't like the fact that it's leased. You're paying too much rent. We need to renegotiate that. You own it. Oh, I don't want to buy it. I don't want to pay you that rent, so let's get out of it. Oh, there was a gas station 4 miles from the place that you rent. Well, we got to have an environmental analysis done because there could be some kind of Melrose issue that we haven't looked into, and we want to make sure that you're liable for that. Oh, wait a sec. You had an employee that stole from you. You had a data breach. Oh, we need an indemnification for all of that because that could incite some type of nefarious bad conduct act against us. Oh, you had a lawsuit. Well, we want to indemnify that against that and anything that could have ever happened. Oh, you had a sexual harassment case. Well, we need to block. Can I keep going? Right? I haven't even looked at the business, and I can tell you what 17 of the objections are, and now it's coming like a download. You know what? I really don't like your suppliers. I don't like your terms with your suppliers. I don't like the fact that you have a concentration issue with your suppliers. One of your suppliers is in Azerbaijan, and they provide 45% of your product. We can't assume that risk, so we're going to have to give you a 30% valuation reduction and make sure we can address your supply chain issues. Are we going in the right direction here?
And and what's interesting about every single thing you said over the last 2 minutes was basically you're saying negotiate. Oh yeah, the term sheet that said they're going to give you $100 million for your company. Negotiate, right? And it's like, no, I really don't want to give you 100. Maybe I'll give you 60 based on all these things we're going to start negotiating. Seth, when I sold my company, I was naive. I was 38, 39 at the time. I was naive, eyes wide open to this whole idea of the horse trade. I was like, oh, that actually exists, which is, yeah, Keith, I had a broker going into the company that bought us, which was, okay, well, you don't like this. Well, we don't really like this. So we'll give you this in exchange for this. And you hear about it on TV and in the movies, but it actually existed in my deal. And I was quite open my eyes to that whole idea of the actual horse trade as we were doing the deal through the diligence, Seth. Just like you talked about, right? Like, I know you don't like where that gas station is. So I'll remove my, extremities around that in exchange for this. The positioning, isn't it?
It is, but again, remember we talked about the keys. Like yes. Again, there's kind of 2 ways to structure a transaction, which I don't need to get into.
Yes.
Like the general contract rule that governs M&A is that you're representing all of these things up to me to a point.
Yes.
And me as the buyer I am working off of those representations. If you sell a house, like if you get it inspected and they get it inspected, unless you have a rare case, they're not going to come back to you and say, well, you didn't tell me there was mold there. Mm-hmm. You're going to say, well, your dude inspected the house just like my dude, and you didn't tell me about it. So thank you very much. It doesn't work that way when you sell a business. The way that it works when you sell a business is there's kind of this look back period from the time that you've bought it. So if I buy it at time X and I'm the buyer, right, I'm going to kind of say, okay, well, if anything you told me was wrong, I'm going to find a way to shave money off of the purchase price and claw it back. Yeah. Right? So the fundamental matrix that exists, again, doesn't necessarily align buyer and seller interest exactly at the time of close. And, all the things that we talked about in diligence are mechanisms and levers in which a buyer can retrade purchase price to get it lower. Now, again, not every single buyer is going to do that. Some are, some aren't. there's plenty of weapons in the buyer's armamentarium to, retrade purchase price.
Mhm.
We haven't gotten into earnout, and we can get into earnout if you want to talk about that now.
I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a dentist to get to, but let's quickly touch on earnouts. Let's talk about earnout, Seth.
By the way, I'm having a blast. I got plenty of time if you want to go fast.
Let's talk earnout then. Let's talk earnout for sure. I want to talk earnout with you because that's some. Before you comment on it, again, my eyes were wide open to the whole thing. And here's what I learned about that, Seth. I learned that I was in the battle. I battled the person that bought me because their interests were different than mine. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. All right. So because we were bought by a big corporate entity, right? And they wanted me to make certain decisions. But I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I make that decision, that doesn't better me. So for 3 years, we had to selfishly make every decision to make sure that the money ended up in my pocket and my business partner's pocket instead of the corporation that bought us, because that's not what it was all about. And it was a conflict from along the way, frankly, for 36 months, but we made it and we maxed out an earnout. But that was a lesson for me, Seth.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a lesson. And, it's a lesson that people like you have to learn with your wallet.
Yes.
Right? And that's not fun. So, when there's a term that the same guy, Craig Fox, has been using for a while called AFC, which is actual fucking cash. Right. So like the first question that I usually want to get to in an offer is how much AFC is there?
Right.
And I see deals that are usually structured kind of like, sometimes 100% cash. Sometimes it's 100% stock of another entity, which if it's the right entity can be as good as cash.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a portion in cash and a portion in stock and a portion in an earnout. And we talk about these portions, usually it's 50, 25, 25 or 30, 30, 30, or, some 60, 20, 20. And, depending upon what the level of integration is and what the strategic fit is and how desperate the seller is, all of those structures have worked. Again, remember, what the buyer is really trying to do is the buyer is trying to strategically minimize how much AFC they're going to give you.
Yes.
And the reason is that is big reveal. That's corporate finance 101. That's the time value of money. The less actual AFC I give you, the less I have to return to my investors. So every dollar that I don't have to give you that I can either shave off of purchase price, or I can borrow, or I can put into an earnout, or I can pay you in stock, doesn't go into my IRR for how much cash I have to put, right? Mm-hmm. So that's real simple. I don't have the stats on what percentage of earnouts work. A lot of them don't work because you just don't hit the number, right?
Well, of course. Yes.
And you could not hit the number either because the integration doesn't work, or they fire you, right? Or the product or service doesn't do as well as you thought it was going to do. So, there's a portion of them that just don't get paid because of that. I've been involved in 2 deals where not only did seller hit the number, they blew out the number, and the private equity guys who bought one of those companies hemmed and hawed for almost 2 years about paying the earnout.
Really?
Because they had taken more bank debt on the company post-closing, and they basically said, this isn't a permitted distribution, so sorry.
Oh. How did the courts decide that?
It ended up working out amicably.
Okay.
The earnout was eventually paid.
Yeah.
And it worked out okay, but at the time it was pretty disgusting.
Well, yeah.
So, I don't know what percentage of them don't work out. I don't have data to substantiate the claim that I would make there, but there's a reason that they're structured. And again, anyone who's going into it kind of has to bake that into, their decision making. But again, if we go back to where I started, if I'm a buyer, I'm going into my tackle box and I'm pulling out, one of these gigantic fishing oars, and that's 2 or 3 treble hooks, right?
That's why I'm really glad you said don't hate the player, hate the game, because until you're in it, you really like when people ask me what's selling the business, I share my experiences, and one of them is you have no idea what it's like when you go through diligence and selling it, and how they're just going to kind of constantly. I love the treble hook analogy because it's like they're going to constantly drag this hook along your body, Keith, and one day it's going to hook you there. Oh, the next day it's going to hook you there. Oh,
It's not just one though.
no,
Right?
I know.
They're not. I mean, they have a bunch of them, and let's go counterpoint for a second, right? So, for as many of these deals that we can talk about where alignment isn't, interests aren't aligned and things
Yes.
don't work out, there's deals that do work out.
Yes.
So if we go back to my serendipity, kind of notion, of the companies that I've been involved with, there's probably at least 3 that come to mind where, I sold the company to usually a strategic buyer in all 3 cases.
Okay.
That not only did everything work out fine, like they seemed so clueless as an organization on the buyer side. They were so big that like this thing just kind of existed, and they overperformed and everything kind of worked out fine. So like what on the other side, for every 4 or 5 cases that you hear that buyer ground me to bits and it didn't work out, I can give you an example that buyer was such a big multinational corporation and didn't have their stuff together so well that the asset that they bought kind of existed without any adult supervision for 2 or 3 years until somebody figured out, like, oh my God, we either have a business here, or oh my God, we have a problem here, right? So I've also seen like the other side of that where we've been able to get somebody like a ridiculous amount of money, because one human being decided that this was an asset that they wanted, either to the exclusion of everyone else or because it met some strategic initiative, so.
Well, I'll tell you, and we'll work towards wrapping up here in a couple minutes. I'll tell you when our company was bought, and I think in hindsight they got a good deal because once they bought us, we just went to work and we just performed quarter after quarter because we hit earnout like okay, and then they didn't know what to do with us because we just kept we were like a bad coke habit. I say that tongue in jest because we just kept producing just cash and cash, just left us alone, which was great. The best way. So entrepreneurs who are going to sell yourself to somebody else, if you're going to stick around, just go produce and they'll leave you alone. In my experience, just produce, absolutely produce. But Seth, love him or hate him, people love to hate Elon Musk. But I got to tell you, when he went and bought X/Twitter and he walked into the building, he's like, okay, there's 6,000 people that don't need to be here. I was like, yes, finally, because don't you go into the pizza restaurant as the guy who bought the pizza shop and say, okay, so I want to learn how to make the pizzas and decide if we need everybody here. And I just love that exercise. And I'm buying, this is my money. I'm buying this place. I don't need 6,000 of you. And we're running just fine with 2,000.
I agree with the theme. With Elon Musk has achieved, what countries of people have not achieved in a lifetime. So I have mad respect for him. I'm not a Musk fan. I don't agree with a lot of things that come out of his mouth. I will never buy a Tesla.
Yeah.
Ever. And were it not for his balance sheet, that company would be bust. But I think that there is a certain amount of credibility to I'm writing the check and I'm going to go in here and do what's required because it's my money.
And that to me is the point I wanted to make. Everything else aside, my money, I'm buying the business. And I think that's what sometimes people we get too much caught up in kumbaya. Oh no, but we need 3 people to do that. Well, no, we only need 1. It's my money. We're running the business this way. Rightly or wrongly, I just sometimes think we get too complacent in business and we need to rock the boat every now and then. So
sometimes, sometimes. I mean, it's an interesting world that we live in, and I think I would agree sometimes that rocking the boat is a good thing.
Yes.
I'm sure I ascribe to that, which is why people talk to me. You know,
one last thing, Seth, that I learned about a number of years back around this, when you're selling your business to VC, private equity, they want their return, damn it. And you're either going to do this and get them a return. And if you're not, they don't want mediocrity. They want you to go bankrupt so they can get a tax credit. And that's their return. And I think that's often what people kind of don't really understand as well, which is mediocrity doesn't cut it in a P&E world. It's either go to the moon or you're going bust, right or wrong.
Yeah, I think I might modulate that some of those thoughts a little bit differently. I think, remember, most, and not all, but most private equity guys are playing with other people's money.
Of
right?
course,
They get money from a bunch of people. So, a lot of them have skin in the game, but the vast preponderance of the capital that they have is OPM. And I think the thrill of the OPM and the amount of capital that you can make off of the OPM in some instances doesn't make them excellent stewards of capital. In some instances, it makes them amazing stewards of capital. So I fundamentally, I've never really met, a real venture capitalist or a real private equity person who wants to put a company out of business. Right? Because remember, if you have a portfolio and you have, 10 companies in the portfolio, 3 are going to die and 3 are probably going to be mediocre and 1 might be okay. And 2 or 3, 1 has to really work or 3 have to work for your portfolio to work. So again, if you kind of think of it as, me trying to raise a crop of sunflowers, I don't really care if all of them live. I just got to have one of them live to have sunflower, right? So again, the first point is that I don't know in my true heart that any of these folks are in business to nefariously make sure that they're going to drive you out of your company. However, what I have found is that most people get high off the opium. And what they're going to do is, if you think about that giant fishing lure, one of the biggest treble hooks they have is that my money is more important than your feelings. I don't care if you founded a fucking company. I know better than you. And what I need to do is I need to make sure you're one of my 3. And guess what? You're in my way. Get out of the way. I told a story that I'll recount for you if you want.
Yeah.
There was a company that there's a sample company that I could tell you about that was a legacy founder. Guy was 80 years old. Okay. $100 million revenue company, about 15 million in EBITDA year in, year out.
Wow.
Did things to make the company less money. Paid for every employee to have a full 401k and full retirement and pension plan. Had a college program, right? Owned the land and building that he was in, rented it back at a below market rate to himself, right? So a bunch of things that he could have done to turn that into from a $15 million a year EBITDA business to probably a $26 or $27 million a year EBITDA business. Remember what we said earlier? That's a private equity guy's wet dream. Why? Because if I can take a $15 million a year EBITDA business, send him home, and turn it into a $26 million a year EBITDA business, I just went from $45 million in debt that I could put on that thing to $75 million in debt that I can put on that thing. So if I go and buy it for $100 million or $200 million, that's 30 grand less cash that I have to put up, right? So if we go back to the question, which is that, do these guys want to put people out of business? I don't think they really want to go in and operate a company. But remember, if their incentive is, I don't care about your employees' longevity, and I don't care about putting your employees' kids through college, and I don't care that you're going to take less money on your building than you should because you feel that that's the right thing to do. And I don't need to guarantee every single one of your employees all the things that you're guaranteeing them. We talk about it once in a while. Is it ethical or is it business? Whether it's business or whether it's equity, the investors' incentives are not aligned with the business owner's incentives. So to your question, I don't know that they proactively want to take over businesses. What I do think is the fact that they have been given a very limited seat on the planet. A lot of those people have such ego inflation that they think that they're superhuman. And they're not. They're just investors who some dumb pension fund has granted an e-ticket to. And the reason that I exist in the ecosystem and what you had said earlier is that the one thing that I do in most instances is I look at you prima facie and I tell you the truth. And by the way, if I was wearing a suit and tie and I was sitting in one of those private equity funds, you'd be more scared of me than any of those guys. Because I'd come and I'd be real nice and I'd be your friend and I would just go back into my tackle box and I would pull out the biggest fishing oar that I probably could. And I would take a 84 foot Hatteras double fly bridge with outriggers and downriggers, and I'd have 25 lines off the back of the boat, and I'd dredge your fucking ass.
That's exactly what it would sound like as you approached them. Seth Yakatan, man, this has been a blast. This has been a blast. You know, I've thoroughly enjoyed the chitter chatter. We need to do it again. We absolutely need to do it again.
Love to.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm gonna let you get on with your day. I'm gonna get on with mine. Anything you want to say before we wrap up and say goodbye?
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very, very, very much. And just really gracious for the hour. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And folks can find you on LinkedIn, Seth Yakatan, right? And Yakatan, and what's the domain?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I have a I have a small LinkedIn presence if you haven't been made aware of that yet.
Just a little one. It's just 35,000 followers.
God, we could talk about that for a whole show. I have a professional website, which is called KatanAssociates.com. And I just recently dropped a personal branded website, which is just SethYak.com. And that just literally just went live. So yeah, all those places.
That's exceptional. Just a quick tease. What's up with the LinkedIn? Are you been bullish over the years? You just been doing your thing and people just show up and like your stuff, or what? Or did you go on a little roll there for a while?
I guess I've emerged somehow as one of the louder voices in the cannabis vertical.
Yeah.
So I kind of bridge this cannabis entrepreneurship vertical. Honestly, Keith, I woke up, in 2022 with about 20,000 followers, and I was kind of like, gosh, there's all these kids on the internet who seem to be making money. Like, why am I not making money on LinkedIn? And it kind of started like that. And it just kind of grew organically into just this kind of a conversation, like me finding a voice.
Yeah.
And just articulating something. And I committed to it, and I am committed to it. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm not really trying to do anything other than, build a larger audience. I definitely have a goal in terms of how large I want my audience to get, and then I'll figure out where I'm going. But, I thought it was going to turn into some type of monetization or asset, kind of cash flow stream for me. It hasn't. And I've kind of I'm not going to say I've given up on that. I'm not using it for that means. I'm using it to just really, at this point, kind of share information and really highlight some of the things that I think need to be highlighted, both about entrepreneurship and cannabis, and using it as a way to educate and demystify some of these processes. Because again, like for me, there's nothing that I do which is special, right? Mm-hmm. Any one of these companies that comes to me, it's just common sense, and it's I don't know what the number is, but I probably look at about 600 presentations a year, and I've been doing that for 30 years, right? So
It's like scouting an athlete. Over time, you get to know which ones are going to stand out, right? So it's called experience, Seth, and it's a great humility you have around it.
When you've had 18,000 reps, you can kind of tell
exactly
what way the pitch is going to break.
Yes.
So it's just it's very clear for me, and that I think that clarity is hopefully helpful for people. But the LinkedIn thing is just it's a whole thing.
Yes. Yeah, well, we're doing the same thing, and I'll offer this to you, my friend. I don't expect you to know because it's still in the middle of the night for you. I laugh jokingly, but I launched the morning show on LinkedIn and YouTube a few weeks back. We go, it's like old school, like what we grew up with, old school radio, old school TV morning show. Start the day with folks. If you have things you want to talk about, if you have announcements, if you have companies you want to talk about, or if you want to get a message out there, come join me in the morning show. Bring your coffee, get up out of bed early, come have a chitter chatter, get at her. We'll create some content. 5 minute, 7 minute segment, whatever, stay for the whole hour, whatever it is, and then be on your way kind of thing. So we're trying to set the tone, do something unique and different on the LinkedIn platform with the morning show. So I would invite you to back anytime for that, my friend.
I love to do that.
Awesome. All right, Seth, I'm going to ask you to hang out in the green room for a quick second while I can say goodbye to Business Athlete Nation, and I'm going to come back and walk you out, okay? Hang tight. 1 sec. Going to do this here. We're going to do this here. So we got just the one on the one, and I'm going to put this back up there. Bring some tunes in. There we go. All right. Boom, 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 boom. Keach, thanks for joining the show, man. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Great conversation with Seth Yakatan. Just had a great chat about, man, stepping into dad's shoes, the entrepreneurial journey, selling a business, diligence, earnouts, the cannabis industry, everything, right? Understanding human beings and what you look for in somebody when you're making a decision. And just this whole idea of if you're selling your business or if you're buying one, selling it, don't hate the player, hate the game. It is what it is. It is what it is. And I love the idea and I love the analogy he used of the treble hook. That's exactly what it's like when you sell your company along the way. All right, nation, I'm getting out of here. Yep, I'm going to go walk Seth out the door to the dentist. He's going to the dentist. And we're going to get ready for tomorrow morning show. Tomorrow morning, we have Jory Jansen. We have Darren Coxon. We have Chris Keach, myself, C. Marty Fit. We are talking about consistency. Wake up in the morning, be consistent, achieve those big goals. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go walk Seth out of the door. We'll see you guys. I got to do a couple things here. We'll see you tomorrow.